100%. Let's get right into it. So before we get into all like the actual free agency stuff, we had a trade go down from our last episode until now. As we all know, John Collins, after what seems like half a decade of being in trade rumors and on the market,
Yeah.
finally out of the ATL. So as we all know, it's John Collins to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Rudy Buckla and a second round pick. Which, if you're not Filipino, that's Rudy Gay.
Damn, man.
Anyways, I mean, let's just talk about it from the Jazz perspective. The
Oh,
I'm getting just
man.
very, it's a Laurie like flyer, to where it's a guy who's got a decent sized contract, and not necessarily has ever warranted that value, but it's also not necessarily out of fact of that they're complete cheeks. When we think about John Collins, how we got that $100 million contract was being a 20 and 10 guy, and I think there's still some of that in there. But through like the big finger injury he's had, that's a big reason why his shooting's fallen off. But you know, I think when you look at this Jazz team, at first, I know how I felt about a rumor. I was like very, I don't know, not full on about the John
Yeah.
Collins coming in. You got a guy like Taylor Hendricks, but I think also just looking at how the Jazz season went, Will Hardy's a guy that likes to let rookies earn it. You know, we all know how good Walker Kessler is, and he didn't even start to begin the year. Ochai Agbaji was a guy who had to get his way into the lineup damn near up until like post All Star, it felt like. So I think it's good, healthy competition, and you know, if John Collins wants to like earn his keep and really get towards that next contract, this could be a situation I think could be beneficial for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, John Collins is like, at least for Utah's perspective, like you pick up another, solid forward who's under contract at 24, 25 years old, I think
Mm-hmm.
with, some level of I think there's still quite a bit of development left for John Collins, and I also don't think he was utilized necessarily right in Atlanta. I mean, like you said, the dude's been circled in trade rumors for like the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I actually like it for Utah. I think it adds a different dynamic if you're talking about on the basketball court purely. Like, Laurie is really good at what he does. Obviously, he was an all-star this past year. Walker Kessler, I think he is obviously a defensive big, a special, impactful defensive big that can spread the floor, who's got nice touch around the rim. And then you add John Collins to that, where he makes his money on obviously being an athletic guy on both ends and can make an impact on that side of the floor. But I think you know having the dynamic of an athletic player like him in the front court alongside Walker Kessler and Laurie Markkinen, and not to mention that he's still got quite some size, like at 6'9". You could even say that they might be going in the same mold of what Denver is doing with a very long and big
Good
front
point.
court.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking at this team competing in the near future, I mean, this team damn near made the playoffs, right? I mean, and they're a very young team. So it clearly looks like they're going to try and compete at the same time, build around their core. And I think John Collins is a good addition to both of that. Um, for Atlanta, I think it's not a coincidence that they were trying to free up a power forward spot when you've been hearing that they've been involved in Pascal Siakam trade talks for like the last few months, and they've been trying to acquire Pascal, but neither does like Toronto doesn't want to budge, neither does Pascal, and he won't commit to signing long term. So, knowing Atlanta also, they had to drop the contract with a new CBA,
Mm.
so they're clearly trying to make a run at some major front court player there. And they also just made DeJounte and Clint Capella available for trade talk for conversations. So interesting times for Atlanta. I think it's going to be hard for them to retool that team, but I think this is kind of like a step in the direction of they've got to make something happen fast, or I think they blow it up altogether.
I can see that. I think for me personally, though, after like thinking on it for a bit, I don't know if it's necessarily for them to gear up for something, but more so, I think clearing up space for a lot of their young guys. Jalen Johnson's a guy who showed a lot of flashes last year. Similar kind of build to John Collins, can do some similar things. More importantly, though, like a guy like AJ Griffin Jr., I'm really excited to see like if they stand pat with where they are and don't do too many big moves. I'm excited to see what he could do. I mean, because as a rookie, he almost shot 50, 40, 90, and you know,
Yeah,
and then
there's a lot of repetition on that front court for Atlanta too.
yeah,
Like a
yeah,
lot of guys. This is like major logjam for the forwards.
no doubt. And another guy, obviously, Onyeka Okongwu. You spend a top 10 pick on him. He's been a bench
Yeah,
rider for the majority of, actually, for the entirety of his career. And then in the parts where he did start last year, he was very effective. So, we'll see what Clint Capella is going to be on. But overall, I think when you look at the Hawks, as much as it is like the trade face value, it looks like you completely kind of shat it. I think it's giving up a little to potentially get a lot out of three guys that could really, really play a
yeah.
be big difference makers in this like retooling. But looking back at the Jazz, if you look at the landscape of the West and we look at who they have, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson's probably the biggest what if because like he has got a player option. But obviously, Sexton. I think Taylor Horton Tucker just opted into his player option. Obviously, got the guys like Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks. You know, I mean, how can we forget our Canadian boy, Kelly Olynyk? Is going to be hooping his ass off in the FIBA World Cup. Laurie. I think there's just a lot of guys there where, you know, it's almost like that Denver team we were talking about when it was the Brooklyn Nets this season post trade where
Oh, like
it's a
post
lot
Carmelo
of
trade where they had a
yeah,
bunch
it's
of
a
different.
lot of ragtag
Yeah,
guys. I think as much as Laurie is an all star, I don't necessarily think he's like an all the way up there kind of guy. That's not to like put him down or anything like that, but you know, I will say with the All Star game being in Utah, definitely played
not
a
a
big
favor.
part of that. But I think it's just a lot of good guys who know how to play basketball, and I'm excited to see what Will Hardy's able to do with this roster. Do you think they finish? What would you say is their ceiling? Because I feel like the floor is pretty comfortably like some kind of play-in situation, whether it's 10, 9, 8, or 7. What do you think is like their
Yeah,
peak though, if everything's clicking?
yeah. I think their peak is probably a 6 seed. I just think there's still a lot of youth on that team. I just don't think they have like that firepower because especially if you look at the West, right? This past year, there's a lot of juggling happening. Um, and granted, I'm talking kind of like as if like there's gonna be no injuries next year. So
Mm.
I mean, if the jockeying stays correct, this is a team that could move up and down depending on what happens with Minnesota. Do we really think the Chris Paul trade is going to make an impact on Golden State as positively as others think? Is a team like the Pels going to completely fall off, right? So there's a lot of jockeying in the West, but yeah, I think a 6 seed safe is where their peak is at, where I'd want to say, because I don't think by any means like this was a where did they finish this past year? 10th, no?
I think
Or
they
11th?
they
Did they
dropped to
finish outside the play?
outside. I think it might have been 11th. Yeah.
But they were, yeah, so they were flirting with the playoffs and the play-in throughout the season. They dropped off near the end. If I'm not mistaken, Laurie was injured for a good part of the second half of the year.
I
Missed
think
a
I think
bit of
that and they
time.
kind of like embrace the tank just a tiny bit just to ensure they're in the lottery.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's a team that's flirting with the playoffs, I don't think they got worse with this trade. In fact, I think they got much better with John Collins.
Mm,
So yeah, I think we're looking at a potential playoff team.
I like that. I like that.